wherever you are in the world. Thank you all for tuning in. We have a really interesting set of guests today to talk about a topic that I think is on a lot of our minds, but I think a lot of us are struggling to kind of wrap our heads around how to do anything about it. And that topic I'm referring to is basically how our home environments affect our health. Um, the home is actually historically something that gets overlooked when we think about our own health. But I think as more and more research has been coming out, it's becoming increasingly apparent that the environments we spend, upwards of 70, 80, 90% of our time are going to have a profound effect on our health. And thinking about things like air quality, exposure to chemicals, mold, things like that turn out to be extremely important and are often overlooked for people. And so Jay and Dom are here from Lightwork Home Health, which is a company that does in-depth assessments of this for people, really comes at it from a precision medicine angle, and ultimately helps people come up with personalized action plans to improve on this. So they are real experts in this topic, and we're going to cover some common like hot button questions that I know a lot of you will have. But maybe the best way to get started is maybe Jay, Dom, do you just want to give a little bit more background on what you guys do, who you are, and what you're looking forward to talking about today?
Perfect. Thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here today. My name is Jay Dev. I'm one of the co-founders of Lightwork Home Health. We've got Dom here as well, who runs our West Coast. Dom, do you want to say a quick hello as well?
Hi there, everyone. Yes, I'm the GM for California and West Coast more broadly, and I have a client assessment right after this webinar, hence being in a car. Thank you for your flexibility on that.
Okay, yeah, perfect. And just to give it some really quick background on what we do, Lightwork offers what we call the world's most data-driven home health assessment. We show up at people's homes, we bring a ton of equipment, and we essentially test for everything that could be impacting health. This includes air quality, water quality, light sources, mold exposure, EMFs, household products, all sorts of stuff. We test a bunch of things on site, we run lab tests, and then we put together these really detailed, in-depth reports for people that cover everything we find and exactly what to do about it. The reason we started this company was out of personal experience for me and my co-founders. We each had issues in our home that were affecting our health, and we struggled to find people who could fully help us. There was no one who was really balancing the scientific credibility and also being open-minded to these new categories of environmental exposures. There are specialists for individual things, but nobody put together in a rigorous, data-driven and science-backed way. So that's kind of the philosophy that's shaped our approach. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for coming and sharing some of your perspective here. I think just to kind of start things off, right? I think that a lot of us appreciate that our home environments are important to consider when we think about our health holistically. But I think a lot of us struggle to separate the signal from the noise, right? I think there is a lot of content now coming out there about all the different things that are in our home that are seemingly, killing us slowly. And so how does one kind of separate, true, genuine things that are, we need to take action on from kind of things that are less important and kind of go into the territory of scaremongering? And so what's kind of your framework for thinking about that? And I think along with that, I'd love to hear maybe your take on maybe 2 or 3 things that you feel like are overblown or kind of are kind of over exaggerated when it comes to home or environmental health in general.
Jay, you want me to take this one?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. So in terms of the framework of avoiding overwhelm and moving towards the right amount of action, the problem in the modern world is not lack of information. You can almost always find all the information that you would want. However, that information is not necessarily applicable to your particular circumstance. And also what we really need is effective information filters. And so what we do when we do assessments for clients is we bring our expertise in pattern matching as well as our experience and expertise in gathering specific data about a client's home to then essentially do that prioritization work for them and give them their personal dedicated 80-20 of here's the 3 things that are going to drive the most improvement for you. Here's the next 3 things if you want to optimize further. And here's what you would do if you wanted to absolutely optimize everything in your home for health. And that's different for every client. and it saves them the need to have to like sort through all that information and know that they're just getting exactly what is going to move the needle most for them, that if they want to is backed by all the peer-reviewed research that backs up why we recommend what we do. And to your second question, in terms of things that are overblown, I think all the things that we test for a reason. There are very real health effects. Obviously, you know, the between air, water, light, EMFs, mold, and household products, the stage that the scientific research is in different stages for each of those exposure areas. And so we have wider error bars or more narrow error bars around each of those, and we can get a little bit more into that. But they all, like, we wouldn't test for anything that wasn't evidence backed. That being said, I think that the cultural conversation around mold has become probably a little bit bigger and perhaps unhelpful for people in creating an experience of, oh my God, I'm not safe in any building. If there's mold anywhere, then I can't be here. Mold's in every building well, there are probably some extremely high-end laboratories that don't have mold, but almost every house that you're going to be living in is going to have mold of some kind. That does not mean that you're being poisoned. There are absolutely people who have severe mold illness. It is a real thing. I'm not saying that it's not a real thing, and it is entirely possible to get quite sick. It is also possible that you could be having symptoms that are due to other environmental exposures, that are due to other pieces of your overall health stack. And what we are trying to do, particularly, and we can go as deep as you want on like how we approach mold. We've thought about this a lot, but what we're trying to do is really support people with an evidence-based understanding of what their risk profile actually is, and then take common sense actions that involve the right level of both financial and logistical commitment based on their risk profile and the symptoms they're experiencing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I love that. Let's pull on the mold thread a little bit, because that actually comes up a lot. I know that, you know, Jay, you personally dealt with this in your flat previously. How do you, like, what is your framework for thinking about mold, and how do you separate signal from noise when it comes to assessing that?
Yeah, mold's quite an interesting one. Just to set the scene, there are kind of a few kind of separate issues in the mold industry, both in how it's kind of diagnosed and also the kind of the inspection and the remediation process. Our approach is what we call a mold likelihood assessment. So the gold standard for mold is a very thorough manual inspection. So a very well-trained inspector comes in, understands building science, understands the home, using moisture meters, etc., and really does a thorough manual inspection. Not everybody needs that. So what we do is a mold likelihood assessment, what we think is the highest fidelity way to understand how likely an internal mold source is, and then if you need to go and get the full manual inspection. There are also some other factors as well. For example, a full mold inspection creates like a legally disclosable item. So when you sell the home, that can impact property value. Our assessment is whether people need to go that stage to get the full manual inspection. Just layer on top as well, we only have like 5 or 6 inspectors across the entire US who we generally trust to do those manual inspections. A lot of inspectors will rely on air sampling, heavily dependent on the airflow patterns at the time. So 2 samples, 30 minutes apart, give very different readings. So that's why there's very kind of maybe not best practices being followed in the space, and why we have very few people who we trust. The other layer that's interesting is also like the clinical diagnosis. So urinary mycotoxin panels are quite commonly used. The issue with those is we don't view it as a reliable indicator of environmental mold illness. It's more likely detecting mycotoxins from food like cheese, grains, etc. And a doctor who actually created it like 20 years ago has disavowed it as an accurate indicator of environmentally born mold illness, but it's still used as standard of care in some circles despite this. There are other kind of diagnosis tools we recommend. The chronic inflammatory response syndrome, that whole diagnosis, we find it a little bit better to diagnose mold, which looks at like the key blood biomarkers, the big 3.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that, you know, I think your point around like likelihood and pre-test probability and kind of this more Bayesian approach makes a lot of sense when it comes to environmental assessments, because I mean, as you mentioned earlier, right, you can likely do an assessment in any home or in any person if you're doing kind of a urine test or blood test, and probably find some kind of abnormality, and then you can then find some literature that then suggests that that thing causes a problem, and then you can kind of quickly make a case that like this is the thing that's causing your problem, when in fact there are many other potential contributors that could be causing this. And I think this is the issue that we have right now in our social media environment, is that everyone is kind of a specialist in some area.
Yeah.
And so everyone makes it out to be that every problem is their linked to their area of focus. And so I think I like that you guys are kind of looking at this through the lens of probability and not just kind of a black and white.
I can actually add one quick thing on that, which is there's an interesting intersection between two of the things that we test for here, which is air quality and mold. So one thing that we'll find in a number of clients' homes is, okay, we do our mold likelihood assessment, and it comes back as, we have these different tiers, but maybe it comes back as possible, which essentially means, yeah, we found some indication that there may be mold. However, we didn't find significantly elevated species counts. And if you're not currently experiencing symptoms, we would not recommend that you need to go get a manual mold inspection. However, one thing that you can do to decrease the likelihood that you would be exposed to any mold that is in your home is really go and build a comprehensive and very effective air purification system. So installing large enough standalone air purifiers, running them on a high enough setting such that you're removing particulates from the air, which includes mold spores. So it's sort of similar to how we deal with water quality, which is the water coming into your house is kind of out of your control, but you can install filters that make the water that you drink cleaner. You could sort of approach mold in a similar way, where most houses are going to have some amount of mold. You can decrease the exposure to your body to that mold by having really strong air purification. So we like to think about, things holistically and not even look at the things that we test for in isolation.
Just staying on the topic of air purification, I'm curious, are there systems or products that you guys especially like for that, in terms of being effective at doing the job of removing not just mold but other kind of airborne hazards as well?
Yeah, we've actually gone very, very, very deep on this topic. There are kind of a few issues with the air purifier industry. There's not kind of clear data given in all cases. So we built our own tool. It's like purifiers.lightworkhome.com, and it basically evaluates all the different air purifiers on like 4 core metrics, like throughput. So throughput, the clean air delivery rate, is the most important variable in an air purifier. Essentially, how much air goes through it, how much air it moves. We also look at the noise level. So we only look for purifiers that are less than like 41 decibels. And can deliver enough clean air under that kind of noise limit. Because if the noise is too high, customers won't use them in the home. Ease of use as well, like the filter replacement schedule, and also aesthetics, because people want kind of nice looking air purifiers in the home. But if you go into purifiers.lightworkhome.com, you can kind of look in further, and we've got like a completely free tool, no affiliate links, etc., where you can put in your square footage and get like the optimal purification strategy for your home. The other point of this is VOCs. So VOCs are even kind of harder to compare for a bunch of different reasons. There's no like standardized metric that allows you to compare them. They have different amounts of carbon, different carbon types, etc. So on the site as well, we've got a methodology page which breaks down how to evaluate kind of VOCs for air purifiers.
Got it. Kind of staying on the topic of kind of airborne hazards or kind of airborne chemicals. What is your perspective on gas stoves? This is something that has been a source of controversy. At one point, there was even legislation being proposed in some states to, ban gas stoves, and there was a lot of uproar about that. And anyway, I'm curious. Number one, what do you think about them as contributing to airborne environmental health? And then B, like where do you stack rank that? And I think like this is something I'd love to get your ultimate perspective on, is like, what are kind of the things that are really high yield that everyone should take action on? And then, like I think really focusing on those things. And I think specific to the stoves, like where do those sit in that hierarchy?
Yeah, I can speak to the stoves question. Bottom line would be, if you're purely optimizing for the maximum environmental health in your home, you should not use a gas stove. However, there are reasons that people use gas stoves, because they really like them, because they help them do the type of cooking that they want. And if that's you, then there are ways to mitigate the exposure of gas stoves. So I'm not here saying, everyone needs to get rid of their gas stove. It's just recognizing that it is a trade-off. And if you were just optimizing for environmental health, gas stoves do emit more volatile organic compounds and to some degree raise your CO2 levels. Now, you can mitigate that with ventilation. You can mitigate that with a very effective hood over the stove. You can mitigate that to some degree with a VOC removing air purifier, as Jay mentioned, with a ton of activated carbon. One thing to note is that the particulate matter that's created from cooking is not created by the stove. It's created essentially by the actual food that is in the pan. So you will still get elevated particulate matter from smoke or other elements of cooking, even if you're using an electric stove. So that's independent of the gas stove. Jay, anything you want to add on the stove? And then if you want to maybe take a first crack at that stack rank, and I'm happy to follow up afterwards.
Got it. And the stack rank question was, what are the highest leverage interventions?
For most people, like when you do these assessments, like what are the things that generally tend to stand out as, biggest opportunities for most?
Yeah, so in our assessment, we're doing two things. When we're looking for the highest leverage, high severity issues and addressing those, and we're also looking at ways we kind of optimize the environments, which are more kind of minor kind of optimizations. In terms of the high severity issues, the top 2 or 3 would be a severe internal mold source. For some people, that has the most immediate effects: brain fog, respiratory issues, fatigue, etc. So that's high priority at getting that addressed. The other ones are there's a subset of EMF concerns, magnetic field issues, and out of the 3 types of EMFs, these have the most research linking them to quite kind of severe health concerns. So we see levels of like 2 to 4 milligauss are linked to childhood leukemia, and we find those in about 20% of homes we test, and come from a variety of sources: electrical errors, overhead power lines, underground power lines, etc. And beyond that, as a general principle, what we look at how residents spend time in the home. So we're prioritizing the areas where they spend the most time. So like a small issue in like the garage or like a room that's not being used is not a high priority concern, but an issue in the bedroom, an issue in the office where people spend a lot of time is more significant in terms of our prioritization of the remediation measures. But I would say those 2 are our top kind of high priority issues. Dom, any other issues you want to add on that front in terms of the high priority ones?
I will say that we don't. I would say it's not true that we, across the assessments we do, find like a ton of patterns in terms of for everyone, this thing is the most important, and then this thing is the next most important. It really does depend on where you live, what your home looks like, how you use your home, what the symptoms you're experiencing are, what your goals are, etc. So it is a little bit customized. I think the 2 things that I would say are, there are some subset of things that everyone should do just regardless, and it will help. Making sure that you have your evening lighting does not emit blue light, and ideally is like dim enough to support your circadian rhythm. A side note on that is, I make sure to say this to every client, is that we can do everything we want to optimize your lighting environment. And if you're staring at your phone until 10 p.m., you are undoing absolutely everything that we are attempting to do. So everyone, make sure you put your phone away and don't be looking at that or a screen. And if you are, try to use blue light glasses, but it's just better to not have screens before bed. And anything you're doing around optimizing your circadian environment is going to be not entirely negated, but sort of limited in effectiveness by doing that. And so, I don't think we have like a great answer for you in terms of, I talk through other like things that we would recommend people do, but in terms of like the stack rank of what's most valuable, there's a reason we do the assessments. It's very helpful to know what's specifically going on in someone's home.
So 2 questions. One is on the point about the EMFs, right? You said sometimes people have these issues. Obviously if there's an electrical error, you need to call an electrician. But are there any things that people can do to mitigate those? Are there, apart from like fix, because like maybe you live in a place where there's an electrical line. Like, is your solution then to move, or is there anything that you can install or have to kind of offset that?
Yeah, I will say, out of the spectrum of EMF issues, an external power line is the only one that's like very hard, sometimes impossible to correct. Our co-founder actually had an underground power line like powering his entire neighborhood, causing a bunch of health issues in Austin. He got his fix by installing something called like an active shielding system. It's like noise canceling headphones for your home. It's quite expensive to introduce. It needs perimeter space, etc. So that's like the one issue that if we find, it can be difficult to address. That being said, there are certain things you can do in that case, like maybe it's affecting one room, you can kind of not spend as much time in there, or affecting part of the room, you can move your bed, for example. There's some certain kind of mitigation measures you can do aside from moving. Beyond that, more broadly, there are a bunch of like things everyone can do to reduce their EMF exposure. Turn your Wi-Fi off at night is quite a good one. Reduce your exposure drastically. Try and eliminate smart home devices, Bluetooth, etc. EMFs also follow the inverse square law, so increasing distance from like 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters can give up to 100 times reduction in exposure. So keeping your phone away from you, your computer away from you, etc., is a good one. You can install Ethernet. You can also cut power to like bedside electronic devices. That's also a pretty big source of exposure. Lamps, charging strips, etc. There's a whole bunch, to be honest, of items that everyone can do. For the more severe issues, they typically involve more advanced interventions. So correcting electrical errors. In the bedrooms, also a common source of exposure is like wall wiring. So wall wiring is emitting electric fields, your body's absorbing that when you're sleeping. So if that's the case, typically requires some more advanced interventions, painting the wall, installing a kill switch that cuts power at night, or sleeping under a canopy. Yeah, it kind of depends on the sources, but there are a few things that are applicable to everyone. Yeah.
Got it. And like, can you measure, like I've seen on Amazon, you can buy these like EMF measurement things. Is that a way for people? I mean, obviously, people should, if they want to get a full assessment, work with you guys, but are those meters generally directionally helpful?
Yeah.
You can go ahead, Jay. I think we're probably going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I think there are some like questions on their accuracy. Anything like cheaper than like the $250 range, it can have some questions for accuracy, but directionally maybe it could work. We haven't seen any that we trust and would recommend, kind of at the cheaper kind of price range. There is one called the Trifield TF2. I think that's in the $200 It's not perfect, but it can give you a good directional sense if you have like a major issue that you wanted to address. Yeah.
The other thing I'd say is EMFs are the area of our assessment where I think we see the most like edge cases, and it can be very difficult to diagnose exactly what's going on because sometimes there are like really unpredictable patterns, and there's a lot of detective work that goes into trying to figure out what exactly is going on. So yeah, I would definitely encourage people to, if they want to experiment, to get a device and play around. But it's very difficult to sort of get confused or not know exactly where the source is coming from. And so it is something that requires like a lot of pattern matching just to get to where you can feel confident in where the source is coming from.
Yeah. So you were alluding to earlier, Dom, like there are a few things that you think people should do that will always help. One you said was the circadian friendly lighting patterns, right? The lamps, and then also avoiding screens. What might some others be?
Okay, rapid fire things that I think no one is going to regret doing these things. Get an air purifier in your bedroom, run it go to purifiers.lightworkhome.com. We'll enter the square footage of your bedroom. We'll tell you exactly what air purifier to buy. Buy that, run it, forget about it. 2, get a reverse osmosis under sink water filter. 3, in most cases, we would recommend that people get a shower filter. And there's a particular brand that has, Jay, is it activated carbon or carbon KDF that we want for the shower filter?
Carbon KDF, yeah. A specific type of it, yeah.
Yeah, you want a carbon KDF shower filter. Other lighting, in addition to circadian lighting by your bedside, I personally find a lot of benefit from not necessarily one of those like daylight high lux lamps, but just a full spectrum LED paired with a very bright incandescent light, which covers the full spectrum from blue light into near infrared for when I'm at my desk during the day. I find that really helps with alertness. And then in terms of EMFs, like things you can do is, turn your Wi-Fi off at night, or at least make sure there's no like routers near your bed. Don't sleep with your phone near your bed, or if you have to for some reason, turn it on airplane mode all the way. And then on the household product side, which we haven't really talked about, that's another one where the research is quite strong in terms of the impacts of plasticizers and otherwise on like immediate biomarkers. And so just making sure that you're using as few products that come in plastic. We really like the certification EWG certified for sourcing shampoo, laundry detergent, dish soap, all the things that come in bottles that you use in your home. It's just nice to, I'm not saying you need to throw away everything that's in your home right now, but just the next time you're buying a new thing, check what's EWG certified. That's a great place to start. It's like 90% going to be effective.
Got it. Super helpful. On the question about water filters, what do you guys think about whole house filters versus kind of doing it at the reverse osmosis, obviously, that you're going to do that at the point of drinking water, but like I think for something like a shower, right, if you have multiple shower heads in your home, like how do you think about the whole house approach versus the at the point of delivery approach?
Yeah, so we'd recommend the whole home filter for most people. It covers all taps, all water sources. The shower filter is mainly for people in apartments or people who want to save the money, not make the investment for the whole home filter. But I will say, in either case, it's definitely valuable to filter your bathing water. I think in all the homes we tested, like 93% had disinfection byproducts in the water. These are these disinfection byproducts come from the government's like disinfection process, creates these byproducts that are VOCs in shower water. They can be inhaled, absorbed through the skin. They're carcinogenic as well. So we think that's a pretty high leverage intervention. And just for full context, our ideal water system is a reverse osmosis under the sink to cover your drinking water, and also a whole home filter as well to cover the bathing water.
And to be specific, a whole home carbon filter, there are also whole home reverse osmosis filters, but in our experience, that's like a little bit overkill. You end up sort of rejecting 3 to 4x the amount of water you use. We find that they have maintenance issues, and you just don't need that level of filtration. So reverse osmosis for drinking water, whole home carbon, and or shower filter, depending on your particular setup.
I didn't even know it was possible to have a whole home reverse osmosis. I can't imagine what the water bill would be when you use that. But hey, people have money, right? I guess, interesting. That's super interesting. On the point about the water, right? I'm going to kind of cover a couple other things that, may be out there, and maybe you can just tell me like this is completely out there and has no scientific basis. But, there are more people talking about this concept of structured water. Have you guys heard about this? Which has to do with kind of the so-called molecular structure of the water itself. And there's devices now that kind of align your water in this way. Like, any comments on that?
Yeah, on the structured water side, it's not something that we have included in our recommendations because we don't think that the scientific research is quite there to warrant the impact yet. That being said, I think it would fall under the category of we don't know, and so we don't include it in our assessment because there to warrant the health benefits. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily not a valid and important intervention. We just don't know enough yet. Jay, anything else you want to add on that one?
Yeah, we've looked into the hydrogen water, which is also quite popular as well. There is some early research. I think there was like a 2024 review that said like the signs are encouraging, but we think there's more kind of larger, more rigorous studies needed before we can that back up the stronger claims that are being made.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple other really good questions from the audience. One is electric vehicles. Thoughts?
Jay?
Yes. Okay. So there's potentially two issues with the electric vehicles. The first one is there have been some reports like magnetic field exposure when you're in the vehicle when it's running. The other exposure source is depending on how your like charging infrastructure is set up in the home. If you're close to if your like bedroom is close to the charger, that can cause some concerns as well. Also, how the charging is like wired. Dom did a home in San Francisco, and just based on the configuration of the wiring, it was like running through the child's bedroom. It was like connected Yeah, there's like a solar panel on the roof, a power wall in the garage, and the connection was going past like the kid's bedroom and causing some concerns there. So those are the main two issues we see in the electric vehicle side. Dom, was there anything else you wanted to add on that front?
Well, I'm currently in a Tesla right now. It is a rental. I don't own one. That being said, I have tested a few Teslas. I have not found I have not had firsthand experience of finding. I found elevated magnetic field levels, but when you account for how long you're actually in the vehicle, I haven't found anything of dramatic concern. That being said, it's possible that there are older models that don't have some type of interventions that are improving magnetic field exposure. Like what I do when I'm renting this Tesla is I just don't ever sit in the car while it is charging. And so I think while the vehicle is charging is also likely to be involving the most current and likely the most elevated magnetic field. So all to say, I think there's more research to be done here, but it's not something that we flag to people saying, okay, definitely don't get an electric car. And yeah, to Jay's point, yeah, I just tested a home the other day where the Tesla charger was within 15 to 20 feet of a bedroom and it wasn't causing any issues. So it is kind of dependent on your particular wiring setup, but it's not an area that we at this point spend a lot of time focused on. And I could just flow right into answering these water questions if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
Not as well. Great. So Philip, great questions on water filtration. Tank and picture options such as zero water. We've tested a few of them. We generally think that they are better than nothing, but not as effective as reverse osmosis. And there are some quite good countertop reverse osmosis systems that are in the sort of $300 to $400 range, but don't require any plumbing installation. And so if your concern is not to want to install anything under the sink for whatever reason, there are options to still get reverse osmosis filters. And that being said, like getting a zero water pitcher is definitely going to be better than nothing. So if that's what you have the ability to do, then do that. Yes, we definitely recommend remineralizing water with reverse osmosis options. That's a great question. And our recommended RO system has an integrated remineralization cartridge. So that's a great question. And then on the 8 Sleep front, 8 Sleeps do contribute some radio frequency radiation, and also they have some like unpredictable behaviors with AC electrical fields. They sometimes cause like patterns that we actually still have difficulty diagnosing. But our general take on 8 Sleeps is if you feel like an 8 Sleep is making you sleep better, then keep using it, because almost certainly whatever benefit you're getting from meaningfully better sleep is going to outweigh whatever marginal EMF exposure it's causing to your sleep environment. So I'd say, if you feel like it's really benefiting you, then go for it. If you feel like it's not, then maybe you could experiment with not using it. And maybe you happen to be particularly EMF sensitive, and so the trade-off's not effective for you. Anything you want to add on any of that, Jay?
Yeah, I'll just add 2 points. On the remineralization front, we actually recommend, as Dom said, getting a filter with a remineralization stage, not adding the trace minerals separately, because we haven't found a brand that hasn't had any that we trust is free from contaminants. There's been many of the popular brands that have been independently tested, and those remineralization drops have like unintended contaminants that can make your water kind of unhealthy on that front. Yeah, and on the 8 Sleep, if you rotate the hub like 90 degrees, so it's pointing away from the bed, you can reduce one type of exposure, radio frequency, by like 60%. So if you are having one, we'd recommend doing that. But as Dom said, like the benefits of sleep most likely outweigh the exposure from the EMF. So, we also haven't had anyone who's switched away from the 8 Sleep after testing their home. So, yeah, it's not a recommendation to replace it for us.
That's good to know. Yeah, I think it just I know we're kind of getting close to time here. I think, look, like there are lots of things that I'm sure like everyone listening to this probably has one or multiple of these things in their homes. I think the question is, how can we be rational about all of this, and how can we not go crazy? Because I think to your earlier point, right? Like there does come a point also where the amount of anxiety that you're getting from thinking about this outweighs the potential. I mean, we know how bad stress is for the body. I mean, that's very well established, right? So I think like I always like to think about how can I be thoughtful and how can I be rational without crossing the boundary into being like going crazy and causing too much stress. So
Yeah.
I think that's for me a helpful framing.
Yeah.
So,
That's yeah.
okay, I'll go ahead. So one thing that we really like to think about on this front is, yes, we wholeheartedly agree. And part of the reason that we founded Lightwork is to give an evidence-based and rational perspective on all of these questions that, do tend to, I think, lend themselves to a little bit of fear and to some degree, in extreme cases, like paranoia that like nowhere's safe and I'm constantly being exposed to toxins. One great thing that we find about our assessments is, and even you can do this without doing an assessment with Lightwork, is if you just, focus on this and do like one round of, okay, I'm just going to improve my air, water, light, EMFs, maybe do some mold testing and like sort of cycle my household products, you can in most cases just stop thinking about it. Like it's not something that you need to, it's not like exercise or diet where it's like, okay, every day I need to make a new set of choices and like get myself to change my behaviors. These interventions are pretty much passive and they'll compound on their own for years and support your health for years to come. And so our goal is actually to work with people to get their environment set up in an optimized way so that they can stop thinking about it and instead just like live their lives trusting that they don't have any severe issues and they've done the 80-20 or 90-10 to improve their environment.
Yeah. I think the other thing I'll add, and I'm curious to hear if you guys disagree with this, but like this is kind of another thing that I believe in, which is that yes, we should try to do what we can within reason to mitigate environmental influences, but we also equally should try to strengthen our body's internal capability because we actually have a lot of inbuilt capabilities to deal with, exposures, right? And I think an example I'll bring up, and again, this is purely anecdotal. So this is not like, you know, published finding or anything, but like, as you guys know, like there are these microplastic tests that are now available. And, microplastics has been a big obsession for a lot of people. People are like, oh, I'm not going to touch receipts anymore. And I'm not going to touch this and that. I did these microplastic tests on several of my patients. And interestingly, the people who were more obsessed about reducing microplastics had actually higher microplastic levels in their blood than the people who didn't care at all. They were just did not care about plastic at all. They were just doing whatever. And so, like, again, like take that as you will, but like I think it is not one to one with like your exposure equals what happens in your body. I think there's other things going on that affect what the net effect is biologically.
Yeah, Jay, are you okay if I take this one? Yeah. So first of all, I'd be very curious to understand more about your clients' like daily usage patterns and also what the sample size is there, because I just suspect there's probably some things going on and like some exposures that they're not aware of that are causing that differentiation. However, I think it's also true that the research on the health effects of microplastics is actually a lot less strong right now than the research of the health effects of plasticizers and other chemicals. And so microplastics test might not actually be identifying like the core issue that is affecting folks' health. To your broader point about like our body's ability to deal with exposures, I think there's a very important distinction to draw here between exposures that are particular to the modern world and exposures that our body evolved the capacity to deal with. One like mental model that I often use, actually used to be a wilderness guide, so this is also like part of how I just moved through the world, is in a lot of cases, what we're attempting to do here is essentially think about, okay, what is the closest we can get to how this would have looked for our body's exposure in the ancestral environment when we were hunter-gatherers, and how can we mimic that in the modern world? How can we remove uniquely modern pollutants like rubber from tires, like pollution, like mold that only would grow indoors when we normally would be living far more outdoors? How can we get water that doesn't have particular types of contaminants like heavy metals, like trihalomethanes that were not present in the ancestral environment? For lighting, we want our body to think that it's sunlight during the day, and we want our body to think that it's firelight at night. And pretty much all of our lighting recommendations break down to like that core model. And so I think that, yes, I think it's true that our body has an immense capability to deal with things that it evolved to deal with. So pathogens, dirt, like I think it's absolutely true that we want to make sure, especially when kids are growing up, that they're actually exposed to the real world and don't live in an extremely sanitized environment where their body is never exposed to anything that will strengthen their immune system. However, I don't think that our body has actually developed a capability to deal with industrial pollution, other types of chemicals, trihalomethanes. And so I think for those things that we don't have an evolutionary capacity to deal with, it's worth trying to create an environment as free from those as possible.
Yeah. I mean, just to push on that a little bit though, like when I say we have capacity, I don't mean like we have like a particular pathway to deal with this chemical. What I mean is that our cells have the ability to deal with damage, right? Like when the net effect of these chemicals is to cause, DNA damage, endoplasmic reticulum, ER stress, oxidative stress. There's like different things that happen at the cellular level. And what I'm saying is that our cells have the capacity to deal with that, right? Like we can activate apoptosis, we can, activate senescence when appropriate, we can clear away. And so like I like to think about both, right? I think it's very important to have this part of the equation. And again, I'm having you guys on because I think this gets overlooked, right? But I also see equally people out there who are just, in my opinion, going crazy. And I think it's important to just to be balanced and to remember that like our bodies have the capacity to deal with any type of damage, really, right? We have to strengthen the internal capabilities while also being thoughtful about influencing what we do on the outside.
Jay, you want to take that one, or I'm happy to keep going?
You can carry on, yeah.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think this is why we think that all of the work that we do around optimization of the home environment needs to sit alongside all the fun, like major in the majors: sleep, exercise, diet, all the things that are going to support your body's ability to engage all of those processes that support resilience against pathways. Because the human body gets stronger through certain types of stress. We have the ability to respond. Essentially, I totally agree with you. And I do think that, I guess, I suppose I would just advocate for exposing yourself to beneficial types of stress through other pathways than unnatural exposures that were unknown in the ancestral environment in the space that you spend the most time. I think there are probably better ways to get that type of, I believe the word is eustress, to like beneficial stress that helps the body respond and become stronger.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know we are a little bit over the scheduled time, so there's one last question about toilet paper. Any thoughts on toilet paper? And then I think we can wrap.
Yeah, Jay, you want to hit these just last two questions here?
Last two. Okay, so what was the question? Sorry, just any thoughts on toilet paper?
Any type of recommended type of toilet paper use.
We'd recommend switching to like bamboo toilet paper. There's a brand I think called Plant People or something like that.
Or having just gone to Japan, switch to a bidet, right?
Oh yes, 100%. Yeah,
bidets are great, and the main reason for that is that the toilet paper that's dyed white in the U.S. is often dyed white with like formaldehyde and bleach, and obviously the area that you're using toilet paper on is one of the most sensitive and permeable areas in your body. So probably exposing formaldehyde and bleach to that area on a daily basis isn't great. So yeah, bidets and like natural toilet paper that's not dyed is optimal.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then I think, Paul, your question, we actually did address the question about the drinking water. So the recording will be up, and so you can check that out. Awesome. Well, thank you guys both so much for coming on. If people are interested in learning more about how to get this done for themselves or for their patients, right? Because I think that increasingly as longevity clinicians, we're really thinking holistically about our patients and how to improve their health. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you to get this?
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having us on. You can go to our website, lightworkhome.com. And if you go to lightworkhome.com/clinicians, you can inquire more about recommending our service to to your patients. We work quite closely with different kind of doctors across the country. We also integrate with different kind of EHR platforms as well, so you can view like the home data alongside biomarker data as well, and give a kind of an integrated, unified approach to your patients.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jay and Dom, for joining me today. I feel like we could have gone on for longer, and I'd love to do this again if you guys are open to it. I think that we probably could do episodes on each one of those things, right? Like whether it's VOCs or water or EMF or all these different things. So I think I love what you guys are doing. Appreciate the thoughtfulness you're bringing to all this, and thank you again for taking the time this morning.
Thanks so much for having us. Really appreciate it.